One day, I was a father. The next, according to a piece of paper filed in a quiet government office in Japan, I didn't exist in my daughter's life. This is the story of how I was legally erased. It started with a silence that felt way too loud. I'd just gotten home from a short business trip, turning the key in the lock of the apartment I shared with my wife and our 5-year-old daughter, Yuki. I was expecting the usual ambush, the sound of her little feet thundering down the hallway, that high-pitched giggle bouncing off the walls. I expected to smell whatever my wife was cooking. Instead, there was nothing. Just a sterile, unnerving quiet. Her room was the first place I looked. The little pink bed was perfectly made. Too perfectly. Her favorite stuffed bear, the one with a floppy ear she couldn't sleep without, was gone. I threw open her closet. Half her clothes were missing. The bright yellow rain boots she loved for stomping in puddles gone. I walked through the rest of the apartment in a total daze. My wife's things were gone too, but the thing that broke me, the thing that made the floor drop out from under my feet, was opening the photo album on the living room shelf. The pictures of my wife and Yuki were all there, but every single photo of me with my daughter, every picture of the three of us as a family, had been carefully, methodically cut out. I was a ghost in my own home. In that moment, I didn't know the legal terms for it. I'd never heard of sole custody, or the family registry called the koseki. All I knew was that cold, primal terror every parent fears. My daughter was gone, and I was about to find out that in Japan that wasn't a crime. For me, it was the start of a living nightmare, a nightmare sanctioned by law. It feels like another lifetime when my world was full of color. Meeting my wife, Akari, felt like something out of a movie. I was an expat, trying to figure out the beautiful chaos of Tokyo, and she was this brilliant, funny, kind woman who saw past my clumsy Japanese and my obvious foreigner mistakes. We fell in love over bowls of ramen in tiny shops, on long walks through Shinjuku Gyon Park, just figuring out the small ways our two worlds could meet in the middle. I loved her culture. I dove in head first. I spent years learning the language, not just to get by, but to really understand the heart of the country I'd chosen to call home. To understand her family, her history. When we decided to get married, her family was a little hesitant. Any family might be with a foreign son-in-law, but I made them a promise. I would build a life here. I would honor their traditions. I would protect their daughter. We had a beautiful Shinto ceremony, and the crisp white and red of the shrine is a sharp, painful memory against the dark reality I live in now. I truly felt like I belonged, and the day our daughter, Yuki, was born, that was the single greatest day of my life. Holding her for the first time, this tiny, perfect person, I felt a love so deep it physically hurt. Her name means happiness and snow. Akari chose it because she was born on a rare Tokyo snow day. And from that first moment, she was our happiness. I wasn't a bystander, Dad. I was all in. I was the one getting up for the 2 a.m. feedings so Akari could sleep. I learned how to change diapers, mash up baby food, and sing Japanese lullabies. My accent probably butchered the words, but she didn't care. She would just look up at me with those huge dark eyes, and everything in the world felt right. We had our routine. Saturday mornings were for the park, where I'd push her on the swings until my arms burned. Sunday nights were movie nights. All three of us piled on the couch, Yuki's little head resting on my chest. I documented everything. I have thousands of photos and gigabytes of video. Yuki taking her first wobbly steps toward my outstretched arms. Yuki's first birthday, her face smeared with cake. The two of us at the beach, building a terrible, lopsided sandcastle. I was building more than a sandcastle. I was building a life, a foundation of memories for my daughter. I wanted her to grow up knowing, without a single doubt, that she was deeply and unconditionally loved by both her parents. Of course, no marriage is perfect. Looking back, I can see the cracks, but I was too optimistic to see what they really were. The cultural differences we used to find charming started to feel like walls. Small disagreements about raising Yuki. Was I too lenient? Was she too strict? Became bigger wedges. Her parents, who I thought had accepted me, started making comments. Yuki needs a proper Japanese upbringing, they'd say. My status as a Gaikokujin, a foreigner, went from being a novelty to a label I couldn't seem to peel off. Akari grew distant. The easy laughter that used to fill our apartment disappeared. She started spending more and more time with her family, taking Yuki with her for long weekends. When I'd protest that I missed them, she'd say that Yuki needed to be with her Japanese relatives. A creeping isolation set in, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that all marriages have their ups and downs. I suggested counseling. She refused. It wasn't the Japanese way, she said. These are family matters. That phrase would become the anthem of my personal hell. I never, ever imagined it would lead to this. I never thought the woman I loved, the mother of my child, could not just leave, but could systematically erase me. I was naive. I thought our shared love for our daughter would be the anchor that held us together no matter what. I didn't understand that in Japan, the system itself gives you the tools to cut that anchor, to set one parent adrift and just leave them to drown. The day it all happened was painfully ordinary. I was leaving for a 3-day work trip to Osaka. I kissed Akari goodbye at the door. She was quiet, but that wasn't new. I knelt down to hug Yuki. Be a good girl for mommy, I told her, my voice thick with that familiar ache of leaving her, even for a few days. Daddy will be back before you know it, and we'll go to the park. She squeezed my neck tight. Promise? She asked. Promise, I said. It was the last promise I ever made her that I couldn't keep. The trip was normal. We talked on the phone the first night. Yuki told me about her day at kindergarten. Akari's voice was clipped short. Is everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said. Just tired. The next day, my calls went straight to voicemail. My texts went unanswered. A knot of anxiety started twisting in my gut, but I tried to rationalize it. She's busy. Her phone died. She's at her parents' house and forgot her charger. I made excuses for the silence, because the alternative was just unthinkable. When I got back to our apartment on the third evening, the silence hit me like a physical force. It was cold and heavy. My first thought was they'd gone out for dinner. But then I saw it, a single envelope on the table in the entryway. My name was written on it in Akari's neat handwriting. My hands were shaking when I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a document. A Reikentadok. A divorce notification form. She had already signed it, and, as I'd later learn, already submitted it to the city office. A short, brutal note was clipped to it. I have taken Yuki. Do not try to contact us. This is for the best. That's when the panic set in, and the frantic search began, discovering the empty closets, the missing toys, the surgically removed photos. It was so calculated, so deliberate. They hadn't just left. They had purged my very existence from our life. My first call was to the police. I ran to the local Koban, the little police box on the corner, my voice cracking at. I tried to explain that my wife had taken my daughter, that she had been abducted. The officer listened patiently, with this look of weary resignation. He asked a few questions. Was there a court order for custody? No, I said. We were married. Were there any signs of a struggle? No. Then he gave me this slow, patronizing smile and said the words that would be repeated to me by every official I would ever meet. This is a family matter, a civil dispute. We cannot get involved. But she took my child, I pleaded, my voice getting louder. Isn't that kidnapping? He just shook his head. She is the mother. In Japan, a parent cannot kidnap their own child. I went to her parents' house, a place where I'd shared countless meals. The lights were out. No one answered the door. I called every friend we had in common. Some didn't pick up. Others gave me these vague, Uncomfortable answers clearly told not to talk to me. I was being methodically cut off. The wall was going up, brick by silent brick. In just a few hours, my entire world had caved in. I was alone in an empty apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I thought was mine. My daughter was gone, and the system I had trusted to protect my family was telling me that nothing wrong had happened. It was my first lesson in a brutal education. In Japan, possession is everything. And I possessed nothing. I had been outmaneuvered in a game where I didn't even know I was a player, a game with rules unlike anything in the Western world. For weeks I was just in a fog of grief and disbelief. How could this be possible? How can one parent just decide to cut a child off from their other parent and have the full backing of the law? To understand the answer, you have to get your head around the three main legal tools that make Japan a black hole for parental child abduction. It starts with a document most people outside Japan have never even heard of, the koseki. Imagine a single piece of paper that acts as your official family identity. It's not a birth certificate for one person. It's a registry for a whole household. The koseki logs a family's births, deaths, marriages, and divorces. Every Japanese citizen is on one. When Akari and I got married, a new koseki wasn't created for us. Instead, I was just added as a note in the margin of her family's registry. My name, my nationality, my birthday. I wasn't a core member of the family unit. I was an annotation, a footnote. And Yuki, as a Japanese citizen, was officially entered into her mother's koseki. This is where the legal erasure happens. When my wife filed for divorce, all she had to do was submit that single form. With a simple stamp from a government clerk, the note that was me was deleted. In the eyes of Japan's official family record, my marriage was over. My legal link to the family unit that included my daughter was severed. I was quite literally written out of the story. This bureaucratic trick is then supercharged by Japan's stance on custody. Until a very recent reform that isn't even in effect yet, Japan was the only country in the G7 that did not recognize joint custody after divorce. The law demanded sole custody. One parent, and only one parent, would get shinken, or parental authority. The other parent is left with virtually zero legal rights. So who gets to be the sole custodian? This is where the third and most twisted part comes in. The continuity of care principle. It sounds innocent, but what it means in practice is that Japanese family courts almost always grant custody to the parent who has the child at the time of the separation. The courts see moving the child again as being too disruptive. Now, connect the dots. If you're in an unhappy marriage in Japan, and you know a divorce means one parent gets everything and the other gets nothing. And you also know that the courts reward whichever parent grabs the child first. What does the system push you to do? It incentivizes abduction. It creates a race to be the first one out the door with the child. The law doesn't just permit parental abduction, it actively encourages it as a winning legal strategy. When I went to the police, they didn't see a kidnapping. They saw a mother doing what she was allowed to do. This isn't some loophole. It was how the system was designed to work. This is the bizarre logic that essentially makes parental abduction legal in Japan. It's what one documentary called a system that encouraged parents to legally abduct children. It's the reality that thousands of parents, both Japanese and foreign, have been forced to face. It's a system where parental rights aren't shared, but are treated like a single, indivisible prize that goes to the fastest and most ruthless parent. I was horrified to learn this wasn't just my tragedy. It was a well-oiled machine, and I had just been fed into its gears. After the initial shock wore off, this burning sense of injustice took over. I refused to let my daughter be erased from my life because of some cruel, outdated system I was going to fight. I would use the courts, the law, whatever it took. What followed was a soul-crushing journey into a legal labyrinth designed to lead to exactly one place, a dead end. First step, hire a lawyer. I found a bengoshi, a Japanese attorney specializing in family law. I sat in his small, cluttered office and laid out the whole story, my voice full of a desperate, naive hope. He listened, nodding slowly, his face giving nothing away. When I finished, he took a deep breath and said, "Your chances are close to zero." He explained the cold, hard math. My wife had the child. The continuity of care principle made her position almost unbeatable. My being a foreigner was another strike against me. He told me about other foreign fathers and mothers who spent years and fortunes fighting only to end up with nothing. Our goal, the lawyer said, cannot be to win custody. That's impossible. Our goal might be to secure 1 or 2 supervised visits a month. 1 or 2 visits. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I was a 24/7 father. I tucked my daughter into bed every single night. Now I was supposed to be grateful for a couple of hours a month, with a stranger watching us in some sterile government room. It felt like a prison sentence, but it was the only hope he offered, so I took it. We filed for mediation in family court. The process itself is designed to wear you down. You sit in separate rooms while mediators shuttle back and forth. Their job isn't to judge, but to push for an agreement. But when one side holds all the cards, agreement just means pressuring the powerless parent to accept their new reality. In those sessions, I was painted as an unstable, angry foreigner. My desperation to see my child was twisted into aggression. My grief was presented as emotional instability. Akari, through the mediators, claimed Yuki was now afraid of me. This is the child who had clung to my leg just days before she was taken. It was a textbook strategy. It worked. I begged the court to just talk to my daughter, to ask her what she wanted. But in Japan's system, a judge speaking directly to a child was not common practice. Her voice was never heard. The court only cared about one thing: who had her now. After months of this agony, we reached a settlement. I was granted 1 2-hour visit with Yuki per month in a supervised facility. It was a bitter, humiliating pill, but I clung to it. It was a lifeline. The day of that first visit, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I waited in a small room with a few sad, worn-out toys. Then the door opened, and a court official brought her in. She looked smaller. She saw me, and for a split second, her face lit up. "Daddy," she yelled and started to run to me, but then she stopped. She glanced back at the stern-faced official and then at her mother, who stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression a mask of cold disapproval. Yuki's smile just vanished. For the whole 2 hours, she was shy and withdrawn. I tried to play, to read her a book, but the joy was gone. The room was thick with the unspoken threat of her mother's control. It was like trying to have a reunion in a prison visiting room. We had 3 of those visits. Each one was more heartbreaking than the last. Then, before the 4th visit, my lawyer called. Akari's lawyer had been in touch. They were canceling. They claimed Yuki was showing emotional distress after seeing me. All visitation would stop. Indefinitely. We went back to court to enforce the agreement. But enforcement in Japan is notoriously weak. There's no sheriff to force a handover, no real penalty for violating a court order. It's often just paper. The court battles dragged on, draining my savings and my will to live. Eventually, Akari and Yuki moved to an undisclosed address. The phone number was disconnected. The lifeline was cut. The nightmare was complete. I was totally, utterly erased. For a long time, I thought my story was a unique, personal tragedy. I was wrong. As I stumbled through the darkness, I found a sad, sprawling community online, a global brotherhood and sisterhood of parents, all erased by the same Japanese system. Fathers and mothers from the U.S., Australia, France, Canada, the UK, all telling the same basic story. A happy marriage, a child born in Japan, a sudden separation, and then silence. We were all victims of what international observers call a human rights crisis. This isn't just about custody battles, it's about state-sanctioned parental child abduction. The problem became so bad it reached the highest levels of international diplomacy. In 2019, the leaders of Germany, France, and Italy all personally raised the issue with Japan's Prime Minister. The United Nations Human Rights Council even lodged a formal complaint. That same year, saying Japan's system violated international norms. For years, the pressure focused on a treaty called the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction. The treaty's goal is simple. If a child is wrongfully taken from their home country, they should be promptly sent back so custody can be sorted out in that original country. It's designed to stop exactly what happened to us. One parent running to a country with favorable laws. Japan resisted signing for years, but finally, facing constant international criticism, it joined the Hague Convention on April 1, 2014. We all thought, finally, there's a mechanism. Finally, there's hope. That hope died quickly. Japan's implementation of the convention has been a failure. Japanese courts consistently use loopholes to refuse to send children back. A parent can claim there is a grave risk of harm to the child if they are returned, and Japanese courts have accepted argument that the risk is simply the stress of moving or living abroad, basically gutting the entire point of the treaty. As recently as May 2024, the U.S. State Department cited Japan for a pattern of non-compliance. Foreign court orders are treated with the same disregard. You can win full custody in your home country, but the Japanese legal system simply doesn't recognize or enforce the ruling. You can show up with a legally binding order, and it's treated as little more than a suggestion. The scale of this is staggering. According to U.S. Congressman Chris Smith, a vocal advocate on this issue, more than 500 American children have been abducted to Japan and are still separated from their American parents. In an April 2024 letter to the Japanese Prime Minister, he called it an ongoing human rights crisis, and for Japanese families, of the roughly 200,000 children affected by divorce each year, it's estimated that a third of them, over 60,000 children, annually lose all contact with one parent. These aren't just numbers. These are thousands of children growing up thinking their other parent abandoned them. These are thousands of parents living in a state of suspended grief, unable to move on, forever tied to a ghost child they can only see in old photos. My story isn't just my own. It belongs to countless others whose lives were irrevocably broken by a legal system that treats a child not as a human being with a right to two parents, but as the property of one. After decades of international condemnation and domestic pressure, a crack finally appeared in the stone wall of Japan's family law. In May 2024, Japan's parliament did something huge. They passed a bill to introduce the option of joint parental custody after divorce for the first time in 77 years. The new law is set to come into force on April 1, 2026. On paper, this is a seismic shift. Under the new system, divorcing parents can agree on either joint or sole custody. If they can't agree, a family court will step in, and its decision will supposedly be based on the best interests of the child, not just who grabbed the child first. The law also says that in cases of domestic violence or abuse, sole custody will be given to the victim, which is a critical protection. When I first read the news, a feeling I hadn't let myself have in years flickered inside me, hope. And I immediately asked myself the question that every left-behind parent is asking: would this have changed what happened to me? The answer is an absolute, unequivocal yes. If this law had been in place, it would have removed the incentive for abduction. My wife would have known that just leaving with Yuki wouldn't automatically guarantee her sole custody. A court would have been forced to look at our family and decide what was actually best for Yuki, which includes having a relationship with both of her parents. The winner-takes-all race would have been replaced by a requirement to co-parent. The very foundation of my nightmare would be gone. But as I read more, that hope got tinged with a familiar skepticism. This is a massive cultural shift for Japan, and the law is full of gray areas. Joint custody will require parents to agree on important things like education and moving, but not day-to-day matters. Who draws that line? It will be up to family court. Judges, the same institution that failed so many of us before. Supporters of the old system have voiced serious, valid concerns that joint custody could be used as a tool for abusers to maintain control. It highlights just how difficult this is all going to be to implement. For the law to work, you need more than just new text. You need a revolution in the family court system and a cultural shift towards seeing custody not as a parental right, but as a child's right to their family. And then there's the most painful question. What about us? The parents whose children were taken years ago. The law supposedly allows parents divorced under the old system to go back to court and ask for joint custody. But what does that really mean? For me, it means reopening a legal battle against a system that already crushed me. It means fighting for a relationship with a daughter who is now a teenager, a daughter who has likely been told for a decade that I abandoned her. How does a court bridge a gap that wide? How do you rebuild something that has been systematically poisoned and erased for years? For my generation of parents, and for our children, the damage is already done. A new law can't give me back my daughter's childhood. It can't erase the years of silence, the missed birthdays, the unanswered letters, that constant, gnawing emptiness. It is a step forward, a vital step for the future. But for so many of us, it feels like it came far, far too late. It has been almost a decade. My daughter, Yuki, is a teenager now. I have no idea what she looks like, what her voice sounds like, or what she loves. I don't know if she's happy or healthy. I don't know if she ever thinks of me. All I have are the old photographs from a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. My logical mind, the one that's been battered by lawyers and courtrooms, knows the odds are against me. But a father's heart doesn't run on logic. It runs on a stubborn, irrational love, and so I still have a message for her. Yuki, if you ever find this, if some part of you ever wonders about the foreign father, from your early childhood, I need you to know one thing: I never left you. I was taken from you. I never stopped loving you, not for a single second of a single day. I fought for you until I had nothing left to fight with. I think about you every morning when I wake up and every night before I go to sleep. I see your 5-year-old face in my dreams. I would give anything, absolutely anything, to see you again. To tell you that I love you and to hear about your life. No matter how old you are or what you've been told, I am your father, and I will love you forever. My story is not an anomaly. It is a blueprint of a systemic failure that has shattered thousands of families. While the new law offers a glimmer of hope for the future, the fight is far from over. It needs vigilance, and it needs a global voice demanding that the right of a child to both their parents be honored, not just in word but in deed. This is happening right now in Japan. Share this to demand change.